The Secretary of Energy for the United States, Chris Wright, who's out in Long Island, New York, to talk a little bit more here about how we find that balance, Chris, between these data centers and these other sort of energy-hungry businesses, and at the same time make sure that people who are just trying to power their homes also have affordable and reliable energy as well. What progress are you making?
Romain, you laid out the right issue. You know, the key thing is to stop the rise of electricity prices. About 25% rise during the Biden administration. President Trump got elected in large part to stop that crazy rise in electricity prices and to enable the growth in electricity supply, as you said, to power data centers. We can't have it as a trade-off. We want to use development of the electricity grid for data centers as a way to ultimately drive down electricity prices for consumers across our country. That takes some time. We need to build new infrastructure. We need to add new power plants, make our grid smarter. But that's when President Trump got elected, to move fast and move decisively against the dangerous direction we were on that was towards blackouts and more price rises. But it can be done. There was a deal, let me just give one example. There was a deal done in Georgia between Georgia Power and Light and Google, a large data center deal, but the net result of that was Georgia Power and Light agreed to freeze their electricity rates for the next 3 years. We can get both. We can bring the power to data centers and stop the craziness in electricity prices. It's a challenge, but it can be done.
I am curious about how we do this, and more importantly, what the timetable is. When we talk about infrastructure improvements, as you just point out, that's not something you can just, flip a switch, pun intended, and sort of have that show up tomorrow. What is the timetable where you can then start going into these communities and saying that, okay, the infrastructure is now in place, or at least is on its way to being in place?
Well, one is we can stop shutting down existing reliable electric generating capacity. You know, when I took office, there was slated to be 100 gigawatts of coal and natural gas power plants closed in the next 5 years. First of all, we can stop doing that. If you want to build a mountain, you got to stop digging the hole first. That's immediate. You know, we kept open a coal plant in Michigan a few months ago. We took a lot of flack for that. There was a brownout in the area a few days later. That plant ran hard all summer long. Thank God that capacity is still there today. So we'll see a lot more of that, a lot of plants that won't be closed. Then we got to be smart with our existing assets. There's backup generators on all sorts of data centers and other large facilities that right now, through just some crazy rules, they only can run if the power grid fails. No, we want them to run when demand is high and prices of electricity are going up. Let's turn those assets on to prevent blackouts, drive down peak power prices. We're going to do smarter things about transmission lines to move electricity better. And of course, we're going to stop subsidizing unreliable, weather-dependent power sources that ultimately are the source of the rise to begin with. We'll still see additions of those, of course, because there's a lot in the pipeline. But we're at least going to stop the subsidy, stop paying people to give us the benefit of more expensive electricity. We lost twice on that one.
Well, when it comes to the cost of electricity, there's a great Bloomberg News article today about how you take a look at Data Center Alley. That's a region in Virginia, of course, that electricity bills for residents have just skyrocketed over the past couple years. And I wonder, from where you're sitting, is your department looking at rules here to make sure that some of these resource demands and these costs aren't ultimately shifted onto residents of these areas?
No, you're so right. There's plenty of examples like that are deeply unfortunate. We are talking to all of the hyperscalers, all of the data center developers, and just communicating to them. If you drive up electricity prices, no one will want AI, no one will want development in their communities. We need to make this a win for America by leading in AI and a win for communities by stopping the price rises. Yeah, it hasn't gone smoothly so far historically. President Trump's only been in office for a few months, but you're right. There's dialogues. You will see some regulatory changes in FERC as well. This plan will continue to roll out. But boy, you're hitting the nail on the head. That's exactly what we work 7 days a week on. How do we stop the rise of electricity prices and enable AI and allow America to reindustrialize? Faster permitting of power plants, stopping the closing of power plants, more sensible rules around grid regulation, and some special things that allow us to get capacity out of existing assets. I mentioned backup generators, also increasing output from existing assets.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff that we can do quick. And some of it's going to take, and some of it, building new assets, of course, is critically important. But you're so right, that takes a few years. But we got to get the shovels in the ground and get it underway.
Well, Secretary, I want to switch gears a little bit here because there was reporting last week that the Trump administration is seeking an equity stake in Lithium Americas. Of course, it's in discussions with the Energy Department to renegotiate some loans. But can you give us an update on those negotiations and the potential equity stake?
Oh, I sure can. So look, out in northwest Nevada, there's an amazing lithium deposit, the biggest lithium deposit in North America, by far the biggest deposit in the United States. And there's a mine under development there. A small company, Lithium Americas, and General Motors. They want to bring domestic lithium is produced in the United States. China has controlled that market for mining and for processing, and they can control the price up and down. They can shut off supply to the United States and hold us hostage to them. We can't tolerate that anymore. But China, of course, has driven down the prices of lithium, so the economics of that mine looked much more challenging, but yet it's in America's best interest to get that mine built. So what we did was a creative deal, engaged with GM and Lithium Americas, to find a way to bring more capital, equity capital, into the mine. Yes, for us to take an equity stake in the mine and to do those things so the mine's going to be viable, economically sound. It's not going to be the next Solyndra. And then we can advance the loan capital that'll help that mine get finished. Super proud of the deal and negotiation that happened there. Yeah. We're going to see a huge new lithium resource come on in the next couple of years that'll displace a massive amount of imported lithium, not just the lithium, but the processing of it right there in Nevada.
I'm sorry, Chris, maybe I misheard, but what is the stake that the government is going to end up having once this deal is complete?
So the government will take both a 5% stake in the company, Lithium American Corporation, and also a 5% stake directly in the mine. That's a JV between Lithium Americas and General Motors. Mm-hmm. So we'll own at the mine itself and in the developer and in the corporate entity that is the developer of the mine. And this is just economic common sense. Lithium Americas needs to raise some more capital so the mine be financially sound. We're leaning in with a large amount of debt capital. So it's just a more commercial transaction where we're making sure lithium is going to be mined and refined in the United States, but we're treating the American taxpayers' money with respect.
With regards to the existing loan that they had out there with the Energy Department, so I assume this would be a renegotiation of that, or it would resolve that loan in some way or another. What is then, with regards to that stake, both in the JV and in Lithium Americas itself, is there sort of an exit strategy, or is the idea that the government would just basically maintain that stake in perpetuity as long as they saw fit?
No, there'll be an exit strategy there. That's not that we want the government holding permanent stakes in companies or in mines. It's just doing a commercial transaction under reasonable terms. There was a loan commitment, not a loan before, a loan commitment, but of course all loan agreements have conditions, and the biggest condition is just to make sure the mine is economically viable. And with the decline in lithium prices, we needed to just change the conditions a little bit so the mine was economically viable. That means Lithium America raising more capital to go into the mine itself, more equity capital. And it meant with the taxpayers taking a little bit of risk on this loan to get equity upside in the project. But it's not a permanent stake. As the mine gets done and things come into commercial operation, we will seek to exit those positions.
All right, Secretary, we really appreciate your time. That is United States Energy Secretary Chris Wright.